In this video, you'll see exactly how I used Google's Gemini AI model to dial in my audio settings and take my audio from this to this. I'll show you the exact process and specific prompts I used to take advantage of Gemini's extensive audio knowledge and processing capabilities. And in 20 minutes, you can get your sound dialed in even if you aren't a professional sound engineer. All right, so the motivation for this video really stems from some of my early YouTube videos that I created a number of months back. They would have a decent sound, but if you listen closely to them on a device with tiny speakers like a phone or a tablet, you might hear a high-pitched ringing noise in the background that I missed when I was setting up my audio initially. And it was actually called out by a viewer. Ah, how embarrassing. Now, I'm not an audio expert, so I went through the typical process of what everyone goes through when they're trying to set up their audio to sound great for their videos. I went through and I looked at websites about audio settings and how to set them properly. I went through looking at YouTube videos on how to set up my audio system, my microphone, my interface, my software, and I would get close. And then the more I tweaked things and the more I fiddled with them, trying to dial in that sound and really just get that amazing tonal quality, everything would just seem to fall apart. And then I'd have to try to get back to something I had previously. And invariably, I get to a point where I couldn't get it to work right. And I just have to start all over again. And it was really frustrating. So I started thinking about this and I thought, this would be a perfect job for an AI if it could be done. And I knew to get this done using AI, I was going to need to have a good multimodal model, something that would be able to review audio and video files and actually analyze the audio to figure out how to set up an audio interface, equalizer settings, all of that thing, all the effects that might be necessary in order to get a great studio sound. So I also thought it would be good that we would have a model where I could have comparisons and do a comparison between different videos or different audio from different videos that were filmed and be able to provide my own reference video as a comparison. And I thought that Google's Gemini seemed like the perfect choice as a multimodal model. Now, what I thought I was going to do in order to complete this process was that I would use Google Gemini, connect it to my Google workspace, and because it's part of the Google ecosystem, Gemini would be able to connect to YouTube in order to review the audio on a particular YouTube video. I thought having it connected to my workspace would allow me to upload video files into my Google Drive, and then Gemini could just access everything and do an audio analysis and then come up with the right settings and tell me what they should be. I thought maybe this won't take many iterations through. And in fact, when I did that very process with Google Gemini, Gemini came back and in 3 iterations, we had a really good sounding audio signal. I was really impressed. I thought it did a great job. And then I asked it, what exactly did you do in order to do this analysis? How did you figure out what audio things needed to change? I was a little surprised by the answer. Gemini came back and it said, to be honest, I didn't actually listen to any of the audio. That's not something I could do. Its security firewalls, its protections didn't allow it to actually go review and analyze any of the audio that was there, not on my Google Drive and not through YouTube. Instead, what Gemini did was review the YouTube video I used as a reference. And I'll get to that in a moment because I chose a video that had excellent audio to start off with. Gemini was able to review that video in terms of the metadata and also review the transcript. Now, it was a video about audio recording and particularly about high-end microphones. So the content of the video itself had something to do with getting a good sound quality. And so Gemini was able to use the transcript to help inform what it was doing. It also knew what my setup looked like and what kind of microphone and audio interface and software I'm using. And so then it was able to combine all that information together and use its deep technical knowledge about these different microphones and audio interfaces, as well as its knowledge about proper setup of EQs and effects to produce a good studio quality sound. And it basically came up with its best guess of what I needed to adjust. Then I was telling it how it sounded, as well as giving it some thoughts about what I thought might need to be improved. Like, we might have cut the bass a little bit too much and we need to bump that up a little bit. Or the high end is a little bit fuzzy and we need to make it sound a little more crisp and tight. It still got a really good signal. And I'm genuinely impressed with the way that worked out. And it was able to do it in just 3 iterations. I was really surprised at that, but I thought we could do better. So I did ask Gemini if it was able to do a spectral analysis using Python, if it had an actual audio file or video file with audio uploaded directly into the chat. And the response was, yes, I can. That means we don't even have to mess around with uploading into Google Drive. What I can actually just do is record test videos on my own system, and then I just need the audio from a YouTube video that I'm using as my reference. Again, I'll get to that in just a moment. We're going to be able to use these files and then upload them directly into Gemini's chat. I'm going to ask it to do a spectral analysis in Python so that it can look at the waveforms and effectively look at how the EQ is set for each audio signal. So we can look at the comparison, the really good YouTube video that I'm looking at, and Gemini is going to figure out what that waveform looks like for that audio and what makes that super clean, crisp audio the way it is. Then it's going to do the same analysis with my video and compare the two, and hopefully it's going to be able to tell me what I need to change in my settings to get me as close to that really high quality YouTube video as I can. Okay, so first, let's talk about my audio setup and what I'm using here. Now, you can see the microphone that's in this shot here. It's in the video. Normally, I don't have the microphone in the video, although that might be changing because I am getting a much better signal out of this, a better sound out of this when I have it much closer to my face. This really is probably only 3 or 4 inches away from my mouth. It is a Shure MV7X microphone. This is a dynamic combination USB XLR microphone. It's one step down from Shure's flagship legendary SM7B. I think actually you have to put the word legendary in front of SM7B now. I think that might be something that Shure's trying to get put into some sort of trademark. Anyway, it's a really good microphone on its own. It's not quite the same level as the SM7B, but it's a really good microphone, and I've been very happy with it since I've purchased it. I've got it on the Elgato low profile wave boom arm. It's connected with a Rode XLR. This is the 3-meter XLR cable, and I've got it going into a RODECaster Duo, which is off screen. That's my full system. It's going into OBS Studio, which is what I'm using to record this. And so it's a pretty typical setup. That's what I'm working with, and that's what we're going to be trying to make sound better today. Now, a big question is, who am I going to be comparing my audio to, and what quality level am I going to be trying to achieve? I'm going to be comparing my audio to audio from Tom Buck's YouTube channel. Now, if you're not familiar with Tom Buck, he is a audio video. He says he's an enthusiast, but he spent a lot of time working as a teacher dealing with audio and video technology in schools, and he really knows what he's talking about. The reason why I chose Tom Buck as my comparison here and the quality, the level that I'm trying to achieve, is that he has fantastic audio quality. And yeah, I'm gonna fanboy here for just a moment. So I don't know Tom. He's not paying me. Tom, don't let this be awkward, please. But dude, your audio is amazing. And if I could just pick one channel whose audio I emulated, it would be yours. And that's what I want to do today. We're specifically going to be looking at a particular video that Tom put together on boom mics and expensive boom mics. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because he's comparing in this video 2 particular boom mics, the Sennheiser MKH50, which is what he typically uses for recording his videos. It is a small pencil condenser mic. Some would call it a shotgun mic, but it might be a little bit smaller than your typical shotgun. And he wants to compare it to the Sennheiser MKH50, which is another condenser mic. So these are 2 high-end condenser microphones that he's comparing in these videos. And both have really good sound quality. So this is the video whose audio I'm going to use as the benchmark that I'm trying to achieve with my not high-end condenser microphone, shotgun microphone from Sennheiser. The Shure MV7X is a great microphone, but I'll be honest, it's not the Sennheiser MKH50. So we're going to try and get it as close as we can, and we're going to see if we can use Gemini to do it. All right, so to kick this test off, we need to get a baseline. I need to know what the natural sound is of the Shure MV7X microphone when I'm just speaking into it. So I've got it in my RODECaster Duo. I've set it to a dynamic microphone with 54 decibels of gain, and I have it set on the neutral preset, and then I just turned off all the processing. So basically, should just be the raw signal from the MV7X going into the RODECaster, and this is what it just sounds like normally. So you probably noticed it's a little bit different than the early part of the video. This is what it sounds like when there's no other equalization or processing or anything like that on it. This is going to end up being the baseline sound that we use with Gemini, and I'm going to record a test video that I'll then upload into Gemini for analysis. So I want you to compare the audio from an audio file and then the audio from a video that I'm going to give you. I will upload both files into the chat. I want you to use Python and a spectral analyzer to analyze the audio forms, and I want you to help me make my audio sound like the comparison audio file. So you tell me which file you want to listen to first. Okay, so Python is asking for the comparison audio first. So we're going to use the audio that I captured. It's about the first minute from Tom Buck's video on the expensive boom mics, and that's what we're going to upload into Gemini. The attached file is the comparison or reference audio file that we're going to use as the benchmark. Please perform a spectral analysis of this file using Python so that we get the results and can use those as benchmarks upon which we will work to make my audio and my microphone sound better. Gemini is going through and writing the Python code to do the analysis here. Okay, so Gemini's established the basic audio qualities of that minute of audio that it's listened to. It's nailed, I think, all of the main characteristics that are present in this audio, and now it's asking for a copy of mine. The attached file is a video file of my audio. Please perform the same spectral analysis using Python as you performed on the comparison audio, and then tell me what the differences are. For your own reference, this audio signal in the video is a neutral signal, meaning I have a Shure MV7X microphone connected by XLR cable to a RODECaster Duo set for a dynamic mic with 54 decibels of gain, a neutral preset, and then I turned off all the processing. So we have no Vox audio processing and no Affix processing. So Gemini goes through and produces the Python code to analyze my audio as well, and now looks at the discrepancies. Okay, so Gemini has identified basically three main things that explain why my audio is different from the reference audio from Tom's channel. The first is the dynamic and the loudness gap, meaning that basically my average level of loudness is just quieter than what is in the comparison video. And part of this is that I've got a microphone that's just a little bit quieter because the lower level has been brought up in terms of compression to help the nuances of my voice, which tends to be just a little bit quieter and a little bit lower. The second thing is the low end warmth variance. And it brings us up talking about that there's the reference file, the comparison has this steep upward tilt low end that peaks around 100 to 150 hertz. And that my microphone actually has a flatter and more clinical roll off in this zone. So basically the condenser mic that Tom uses in his video has a heavy proximity effect, and it's just a better microphone. I mean, so there's a certain thing that we have to have some expectations around, and we need to manage those expectations because I'm never really going to be able to get the Shure MV7X to sound like a Sennheiser MKH50. We're going to try, but it's probably not going to sound exactly the same. The third thing that Gemini brings up is there's a high frequency intelligibility, and this is in the upper end where the comparison file between the 4 kilohertz and 8 kilohertz range, there's some clarity which allows it to cut through background music. And my microphone sort of smoothly tapers off here. It doesn't have any kind of a peak that really allows this to cut through and be crisp and clear. And there's a natural roll off in the high frequencies, it says, which is faster than premium condenser microphones, which is what the comparison is. So without processing, my track's just not going to have that high definition air and crispness. Let's go ahead and see what Gemini recommends for making the updates, because it does know I have a RODECaster Duo. We can make those changes right here and not have to worry about doing it in post-production. All right. Yes, I would like you to tell me what settings in Aphex processing that I need to use in order to make my audio sound as close to the comparison audio as possible. Okay, so Gemini's done its analysis and it comes back with a few recommendations. The first recommendation is that we implement a high pass filter set for 75 Hertz. So this will cut out that low frequency background noise and vibrations without thinning out the core frequencies from my speaking voice. Then for the equalizer, we're going to adjust all three bands, and we're going to have the low band frequency set to 110 Hertz with a gain of 2 decibels. And then we're going to set the mid band for 400 Hertz with a gain of negative 1.5 decibels. This actually drops down some of that mid range. And then we're going to set the high band of 5.5 kilohertz or 5,500 Hertz to a gain of plus 2.5 decibels. And that'll give the mic more expensive condenser sharpness, helping my vocal clarity cut through with high-end clarity. We're then going to implement a compressor here with a threshold between negative 18 decibels and negative 20 decibels. And it says go ahead and adjust this to what sounds good. And then we're going to have a compression ratio of 3.5 to 1 with an attack of 25 milliseconds, a release of 150 milliseconds, and a gain of positive 3 decibels. And these are all just adjusting how the compressor works, how quickly it compresses audio, when it stops compressing the audio, and when it's, if there's volume loss during compression, how much is going to boost that with the gain. Now, the next thing that Gemini is going to recommend here is that we use the Aphex Aural exciter and big bottom effects. Now, these are two synthesized effects for adding harmonic synthesis that a standard EQ can't do. The big bottom actually drives a sort of boomy bassiness into the signal to really give it some depth. And then the Aural exciter is kind of what it sounds like. It adds that harmonic shimmer to the top end. It just kind of sprinkles in some sparkles into the sound. I have to be honest, I really was not wanting to use these effects if I could get away with it. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to ask Gemini if we can do this without using the Aural exciter of the big bottom effect and see what it says. Thanks for these settings. I would really like to try to do this entirely with the equalizer if we can, and not using the Aural exciter or the big bottom effect in the RODECaster Duo. I'm fine with using the high pass filter and the compression and even a noise gate if we need to, but I would prefer not using those two particular synthesized effects. Do you have any recommendations for adjusting these settings so that we don't have to use them? Gemini comes back and says that makes complete sense, and relying on traditional acoustic adjustments with an equalizer is probably a great approach for coming up with a more natural, authentic broadcast tone. In all fairness, those Aural exciter and big bottom effects in the RODECaster Duo are two of the effects that make this device what it is, and they're useful in their own right. I'm just trying to see if I can use them so that I'm not over processing my voice. So instead, Gemini is going to give us a few adjustments now that we're going to implement, and then we'll test out what those sound like. So the settings now have been adjusted so that on the equalizer, we're going to set the low band frequency to 115 Hertz with a gain of plus 3.5 decibels. That's up from 2 decibels. It sounds like a lot to me, but we'll see what it sounds like. In the mid band, we're going to set the frequency to 450 Hertz with a gain of negative 2 decibels. Again, we're dipping this down and we're dropping down that mid range in the tonal quality. I'm not so sure about this, but we'll see. And then the high band, the frequency is 6.5 kilohertz or 6,500 Hertz. And we're going to set a gain of plus 4 decibels, which is higher than what Gemini originally suggested of 2.5 decibels. So we're driving up that high end and the low end, and we're kind of dropping down the middle end here. Now we're going to set the high pass filter using a frequency of 80 Hertz. That's up from the 75 Hertz it originally recommended. We are going to set up a noise gate, even though my room is fairly quiet, but it doesn't have a lot of super soft surfaces in here. There is carpet. I do have a cloth chair behind me, but I still have a lot of hard surfaces. There's hard walls. I have a hard desk. I have bookshelves over here. So there's a little bit of resonance in there. And so we're going to set up a noise gate to keep that background noise out. And so we're going to have a threshold of negative 48 decibels, an attack time of 10 milliseconds, a hold time of 100 milliseconds, and a release of 150 milliseconds. Then we're going to set the compressor to, again, a ratio of 3.5 to 1 with a threshold around negative 20 decibels. And we're going to bump the makeup gain to 4 decibels. And so this, according to Gemini, will give it a purely acoustic, non-synthesized chain in a test run. So we're going to go ahead and set that up. And then I'm going to record a test video and we'll give it to Gemini to analyze and see what it sounds like. Okay, so now I have made those adjustments that Gemini recommended, and I've got here also a spreadsheet where I'm tracking all of these settings. And I recommend that if you're doing this yourself, you set up a spreadsheet like this, so as you make adjustments, you can keep track of all the settings that were set. And that way, if you ever need to revert back to something, you can get back to those settings. And I recommend also that you name your recording files and use those as the names that you use for each of the set of settings, so you know which recording file relates to which setting. So here we've made this update and we've got all of these set up. I'm going to go ahead and read these off to Gemini so it knows. Some of these settings are a little bit off from what it recommended, but that's because of the way the RODECaster Duo knobs are set and the way it increments. So in some of these places where it said, for example, the compressor should have a release of 150 milliseconds, I can't actually select 150 milliseconds. I can get 148.9 milliseconds, which is the closest. I don't know why that's the case, but that is the way that the RODECaster is set up. Okay, I have attached a new video file for you to analyze the audio from. This file was set with a channel preset of a dynamic microphone with 54 decibels of gain. The high pass filter is on with a frequency of 79.9 hertz and a slope of 12 decibels. The de-esser is off. The noise gate is on with a threshold of negative 48 decibels. The attack is set to 9.93 milliseconds. Hold is set to 100.8 milliseconds. Release is set to 148.9 milliseconds. Range is negative 15 decibels, and hysteresis is 0.2. The compressor is on with a threshold of negative 19.8 decibels, a ratio of 3.5 to 1, an attack of 10 milliseconds, which is the maximum amount I can set it to, and a release of 148.9 milliseconds, with a gain of plus 3 decibels. The equalizer has the high bell set to 6548.5 hertz. The high gain is 3.8 decibels. The mid bell is set to 450.9 hertz, and the mid gain set to negative 1.9 decibels. The low bell is set to 115 hertz, and the low gain is set to 3.4 decibels. The Aphex Big Bottom is turned off and the Aural exciter is turned off. Please analyze this audio and determine whether or not any further adjustment is needed in order to achieve the same level of sound as in our comparison video. Okay, so Gemini came back with an analysis very quickly and said that we were basically right on target with what we needed, except that I needed to increase the makeup gain on my compressor to plus 5 decibels or plus 5.5 decibels. I asked it if it had used the spectral wave analysis in Python, and it confirmed that it did and showed me the code that it used to do that analysis. It then came back and said what the analysis revealed, and it said that our waveform perfectly mirrors the curves of the reference line. The dip that we made at the 450 hertz completely flattened out the room boxiness, and the aggressive high shelf boost at 6.5 kilohertz successfully forced the dynamics of the Shure MV7X to mimic the top end clarity of the Sennheiser condenser microphone. Now, I don't think that this audio still sounds as good as Tom Buck's audio that he recorded with the MKH50, but the Gemini also noted that the loudness gap is really the difference, and that my adjustments force my waveform to sit a little bit lower in the middle on the entire graph. And so my frequencies are balanced, but the overall energy envelope is compressed. And it says that the mathematical confirmation is exactly why raising the compressor makeup gain to 5 or 5.5 decibels is the final step. It will uniformly slide the entire frequency curve upward in the plot and perfectly lock in with the reference track. I asked it to show me an image of the comparison between the waveforms. I have to say this was certainly lackluster from my perspective because I don't think this is a particularly great graph. I don't think it's particularly helpful, nor do I think it's actually very accurate. That being said, I'm taking it at its word right now. And so the last thing I'm going to ask it is whether we really just need to do the makeup gain on the compressor, or if overall loudness is the problem, shouldn't we just raise the overall gain on the channel? Thank you for your analysis. A question I have for you is, if overall loudness is the real gap between our waveform and the reference waveform, do we really need to increase the gain on the compressor? Or should we be increasing the gain on the overall mic level and go from 54 decibels up to, say, 55 or 58 decibels? So the answer that Gemini comes back with is that there's a resounding, we should be adjusting the compressor gain. And largely that's because if we increase the main preamp gain, that's going to impact the sensitivity of the microphone. And it's also going to change how the compressor acts because we'll be hitting the compressor with more power going into it. And what will happen then is that's going to change the behavior of that compressor, which will change the audio quality. And it could introduce some preamp hiss into the actual microphone itself. So using this gain in the compressor is going to take the waveform that we currently have, perfectly compressed audio with clean slides, an entire volume slider up, and it's just going to move it and make it just a little bit louder without changing how hard the compressor is clamping down and without risking preamp distortion. So I'll go ahead and make this adjustment, and then we'll do a comparison of the audio again and see how it sounds. Now we've adjusted the compressor gain up to a 5, and I've got the test audio, which I'm going to give to Gemini now. Attached is a new video file where the compressor gain has been increased to 5 decibels, plus 5 decibels. I would like you to perform the spectral wave analysis using Python on this audio, and then compare it to the reference file audio and see how close we've gotten. Okay, so Gemini has said it's done the analysis, and it says that we have, quote unquote, officially hit the target. Bumping the compressor makeup gain to plus 5 decibels completely closed the loudness gap, and that the energy profile now of my microphone is sitting right on top of the reference audio from the video that we pulled it from, and that we're getting the exact same broadcast punch and authority without sacrificing an ounce of clarity. Here's the Python script that was used to get the results. So in the original waveform, our sound was gappy and thin, showing large spikes whenever I hit a hard consonant. And the body of my waveform was now beautifully dense and uniform. So we compressed and boosted the signal, and it has the same persistent energy as a commercial Sennheiser track. The frequency intersect, it says because we achieved this entirely through clean parametric equalization adjustments and not using the synthesized effects, the frequency line is fairly pristine, and we've got these settings. And it also says that the noise gate settings are now perfectly transparent, and that the moment I stop speaking, the waveform drops to a complete flat, dead silent line, and there's zero amplified or preamp hiss or room noise in this, and that I should just save this preset. Now, I do have one more test that I want to perform, and this is based on audio settings that I came up with the other day while going through this process with Gemini, and I want to use the spectral analysis on these settings to see how they compare to the settings that Gemini just came up with. Let's go ahead and see what this actually sounds like and how it compares. I have one more video where I want you to analyze the audio and then compare it both to the comparison video, but then to the adjust_3 video that I provided you previously. Please perform the spectral wave analysis using Python on the attached video and make those two comparisons. I would like to know how this video stands up to both our comparison video and the video that you say has the best audio so far. So when comparing the settings that I created with Gemini the other day against the Sennheiser benchmark, it definitely comes back and says that the Sennheiser benchmark still sounds better. It's got a slightly louder and has a slightly denser dynamic weight to the audio. So it's a reference track that utilizes a broadcast compression style, and it sounds really good. And that the settings I had from the other day don't quite match that intense maximized wall of sound volume that the commercial voiceover targets. When comparing it to the settings that Gemini just came up with for us, it says that the settings that it came up for remain the superior profile for matching the target benchmark. And the reason why is A, the volume curve, because we boosted the compressor gain up to 5 decibels, so we're matching that volume curve. And then in the new clip, my overall loudness drops, but it sits very close to what we had for the first set of adjustments that we did earlier in this whole process. So we're leaving a gap in there that just doesn't sound quite as well. And then it gives me a comparison here against the three, which I'm not going to dig into right now. But basically, in the end, it ends up saying that the set of adjustments it gave us recently are the ones that fit the best against the different curves. Now, I have one additional question for Gemini because I'm kind of a research type guy. I'm a numbers guy. Can you provide me with any quantitative results on the comparisons between these waveforms from the spectral analysis so that I can see what the quantitative differences are instead of strictly giving me a qualitative explanation of those differences? I'm trying to understand where the signals differ and how much they differ by. Okay, so Gemini comes back with a couple of different metrics that it wants to compare. The first metric is the overall energy and loudness metrics. This is the broadband loudness or RMS metric. And what it's doing is this is the root mean squared amplitude, which is just a fancy way of saying that it's calculated the average loudness. So the Sennheiser benchmark comes back with RMS of 0.0814. And we said the closer that it is to 0, the denser and louder the audio signal is. On the best setting that Gemini created for us just now, the profile is 0.0789. So it's very close to the Sennheiser benchmark, whereas the settings I had from the other day, adjust for, are 0.0521. And so that's actually a 36% drop in power versus 3.1% difference in what we just developed with Gemini during this process. Then it wants to compare the spectral band energy. So what it's done then is it splits the waveform into 3 different levels of low, medium, and high sound based on the frequencies, much like an equalizer. And so what it says is at the low end, the Sennheiser benchmark is 24 decibels below the peak signal. So the peak signal would be 0, right? And so it's 24.2 decibels below that. The signal at the low end for Gemini's best sounding audio that it came up with today is negative 25.1 decibels. And the audio that I developed a couple of days ago with Gemini are at negative 29.8. So the farther away from 0 those numbers get, the more negative they are, the less audio there is in that wavelength range. And so you can see we're much closer to the audio level, the volume level in that wavelength range compared to the reference video. And then in the mid-range, the Sennheiser benchmark is negative 28.5, whereas Gemini's audio from today is at negative 29.2, and the audio that I developed the other day is at negative 32.4. So again, that audio drops off more in the mid-range than what we developed just today. And then looking at the high end, you can see this is where we're talking about the crispness and the high definition airiness of the microphone, that the Sennheiser audio is at negative 38.1 decibels, and the Gemini settings from today are at negative 39.5, whereas the settings I developed a few days ago are at negative 44.3. So again, we're getting farther away. Those settings I developed a few days ago, they don't carry the weight or the loudness that we have in the overall setting. And when you look at it, not only as an average across the entire waveform, but then when you chunk it up into specific segments of the waveform, you can see that our best sounding audio developed with Gemini today are actually pretty close to what we have with the reference audio from Tom Buck's video. Now, in the end, again, I still don't think that the Shure MV7X microphone is producing the same quality of audio that the Sennheiser 50 is, but I still think we got some pretty good audio out of it. And we did it using Gemini. So here I am back on the audio settings that Gemini helped develop for us using the spectral waveform analysis in Python. And I have to say, I think it turned out really well. And I actually do think that this sounds just a little bit better than the settings that I came up with the other day when I was working with Gemini. Now, I'm not surprised because, as I mentioned, the other day when I did this, at the end, Gemini told me it didn't actually listen to any of the audio that we were working with. Whereas today we had Gemini work with the spectral waveform analyzer using Python. Now, if you were going to do this yourself and you wanted to do this with Gemini, it's very easy to do. You just need to get an audio example that you want to compare your audio to, something that you really like, and then you need to record your own audio, give them both to Gemini, just like we did here today, and ask it to go through that spectral waveform analysis with Python. The whole process, if you do it without the recording, is probably going to take you about 30 minutes to go through in terms of recording a baseline, giving it to Gemini to do the analysis, then making some adjustments to your settings, your audio interface, your software, your microphone, and then repeating that process until you get to something that you want. But you'll notice that we only had to do 2 sets of adjustments, and Gemini was able to get very, very good audio out of this. So it doesn't take that long. There's not that many cycles that you have to go through in order to do this. So the whole process should take about 30 minutes. Now, the one thing that I do want to bring up is to just mention that good audio is in the ear of the beholder. What sounds great to one person might not sound that great to somebody else. I mean, we can all tell when somebody is recording something that sounds so terrible that it's garbled and it sounds scratchy and it's fuzzy and we can't understand what they're saying. But good audio at the upper end really depends on so many things. It's the microphone, it's the cable, it's the interface, it's the software it goes into, it's the person's voice speaking into the microphone. It's the way the room is designed and the treatment of the room. So there are so many factors that go into that. The real question is not what is the best sounding audio, because that best sounding audio and the settings you need to get the best sounding audio are going to differ from one setting to another. If I took these exact same settings and we went into another room in my house or into another house, we would get different results. And it's important to keep that in mind. So in the end, good audio is what it sounds good to you. And if you work with Gemini with some comparison audio, you'll be able to get your audio fairly close to that sound based on the equipment that you have and its capabilities. But keep in mind, there is no one single set of settings that's going to give you the best audio all the time, everywhere, with every piece of equipment. Now, if you found this video helpful, then go ahead and hit that like button, because this channel is all about using AI, particularly for small business owners. And this is one place where we all know that audio is so very important, and having good audio is so very important for creating good videos. So hit that like button if you found this helpful, so that other small business owners can find it and get it shown to them, and then they can benefit from it. And don't forget also to subscribe to the channel, because I post videos every week about how to use AI for doing things like this, automating systems, implementing strategy, and analyzing data in your small business. Don't forget to check out Tom Buck's YouTube channel to get all of his great insights on audio and visual tools and techniques. And Tom, if you're watching this, I truly appreciate all that you do on your channel. I'm Rob Fernango. This is the AI Growth Accelerator, and I'll see you in the next video.